If you're a wide receiver and you are tired of being slow, you want to become a faster wide receiver on your team, watch this video. All right, so today we're going to be talking about how you can be a faster wide receiver. We're talking about how you can make faster cuts, general things that are going to make you faster, and overall speed tips that you guys can use at the receiver position. So this video is going to give you a ton of value. We're going to break down a ton of different film from Tank Dell, Garrett Wilson, and tons of fast wide receivers. But also, fellas, if you're a receiver and you would like to train with us this offseason, we are coming out to 15 different cities across the country for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver camps. Our next two camps in San Francisco and Miami are completely sold out, and all of these camps will eventually sell out probably 3 months in advance. So if you guys would like some more information on how you can sign up for our 13 remaining camps, check out that very first link in the description below. We're coming all the way from Portland to Detroit to Houston, all over. So again, very first link in that description below, fellas. Let's get started with this video. So first thing I want to talk about here is speed in and out of cuts before we talk about general things that are going to make you a faster wide receiver. So this is a great example of Tank Dell running a very explosive route, right? Now, again, I'm not going to focus too much on the route. I'm not going to focus too much on the break. I want to focus on this first cut that he makes because this sets him up for explosion throughout the whole thing. So you see how he cuts. It's just such a violent movement. There's so much speed in that movement. So how is he able to do that? So leading up into your routes, obviously, as a wide receiver, I think it's more important as a receiver to have same speed into the break and having the same speed that you had into the break out of the break. And a lot of that has to do with the break point and allowing it to shoot you out of the break with the same speed. It has to create energy. It has to create, and that energy comes from explosion. So when you guys are cutting at the top of the break, we want to shoot this foot into the grass as quickly as I possibly can. Whether it's an out route, whether it's a corner route, or whether it's a post route. Like, you want to strike the ground hard. See, a lot of people are so afraid of knee injuries, Achilles, ankles, because you see all those injuries, and anytime there's an injury, what are all the Instagram accounts doing? They're posting the injury everywhere saying, oh, you don't want to do this, you don't want to do that, this is why this is why that. But guys, you got to step hard. If you want to cut moving at a fast pace, you got to strike the ground hard. Now, there are mechanical things that you can do to improve that, and that's what I want to discuss in this specific clip. So when you break like this, guys, and you're trying to step hard, the most important thing is that this cut stays inside your frame. I think a lot of wide receivers hurt themselves or lack speed on their cuts because they reach super far. They try to over-exaggerate this portion. How many of you guys have seen wide receivers, and some of you have probably done this before, cut, and then their back foot drags, all this turf flies up in the air. But guys, that they drag the back foot for control, but you don't need to drag your back foot for control. You drag your back foot for control because your front foot is so far outside your frame that you can't plant without dragging your foot. You cannot make a sharp cut without dragging it. And that drag is wasted time and wasted speed. You see how Tank Dell, he cuts, where's his next step? Already out of the break. His hips are already opening up. He's already getting out of this thing and getting into this route. So, or getting into the catch portion of this route, if you will. So guys, we don't need to drag my feet. It's about the explosiveness of the cut and keeping it inside your frame. A good gauge is going to be striking the ground, ball of the foot first. A lot of guys will reach outside their frame and their heel strikes the ground first. And it starts with young wide receivers. Younger wide receivers develop these bad habits very early on. And that constant wear and tear on their knee, they may not hurt themselves right off the get, but years down the road of constantly striking the ground outside the frame, dragging their feet, puts so much pressure on their knee, it makes them slower and it can lead to injuries, right? But most importantly, it can lead to injuries. But second most important is you're slow. You're not getting speed out of the break. When your feet are inside your frame, you can just push and drive rather than having to drag and take all these extra steps. But it starts with stepping hard and starts with stepping on the ball of the foot first. When you go heel toe, you're outside your frame. When you go toe heel, for lack of a better term, you're inside your frame. Now, when you cut to control that speed, you want to try to push off the ball of your foot or middle arch of your foot. That middle arch, like you see on this defender here, that middle arch, it's like if you're wearing Nikes, where the Nike logo is on the inside part of the shoe, that's your middle arch. So when your ball of the foot hits and then your whole foot gets down, you could get your whole foot down, by the way, you can push off of that ball and middle arch, and that push directs that energy and turns that energy into acceleration where we want it to go. Remember, it's all about speed in in and then having the same speed out. And that speed out comes from that explosive step, stepping hard, the right foot strike, and us pushing. If we can do that, that is how we'll get more separation and more speed out of my cuts. So let's play this thing again, full speed one more time. Great job by Dell braking, pushing out of it, and then getting on and putting the brakes onto this route. So now there are other routes that require a little bit of speed into them, and that is routes where you are going to be dropping your hips. So this is going to be an example of like a diamond release slant here from Garrett Wilson. This applies, honestly, though, the same thing to a hitch, same thing to a comeback, and same thing to a curl. More importantly, I wouldn't say a hitch, but more importantly, routes where you have to drop your hips and then get out, right? Because like, let's say, for example, let's not think about a slant for a second here. Let's think about like a comeback route, right? And not on every slant, you don't need to do this. We're going to talk about why Garrett Wilson does this. But let's say it's a comeback route, for example. You're going all the way up, and let's say it's a 15 back to 12 comeback. At 15, you got to create energy, and you don't want to lose any speed out of that energy creation phase of the route, aka the break point. You want to accelerate back to 12 yards with the same speed that you had into the break. So you have to create energy, right? So let's watch what Wilson does here. So he bursts up, pushes up vertical, throws by, and then is able to get out of this break. And he gets out of that break with some speed because he's got to win the race to the ball with the DB, right? So what gives us that energy when I drop my hips? Why did he drop his hips on this? Because a slant route is usually a route where you just cut off of one foot. It's because he's doing like this throw-by move, right? So he's doing a diamond release, which is where you attack this DB's outside shoulder and outside hip. The goal is to get him to open up to the fade like he does, and then we slip underneath him to win on the slant. So when we do that, sometimes we have to drop my hips to be able to slip under this DB. It's hard to slip under him off of one foot. Sometimes instinctually we have to drop. Now, when we drop, the goal position is we want to try to be as violent as I can with my like sitting my butt down, if you will. I want to try to sit into a chair as quickly as possible. Like you're playing musical chairs and the music just stopped and you have to sit down. The spot that we want to get to is a 90-degree angle with my lower body. I know Wilson is a little bit below 90 degrees right here, but 90 degrees is the spot that we want to be. Why do we want to be to 90 degrees? Because that's not too low to where like, because if Garrett Wilson gets any lower right here, he's going to get stuck and he's not going to be able to drive out. And if you're higher than 90 degrees, sometimes that causes a little bit of extra steps. Maybe you drift up field because your center of gravity is not lower. We lower my center of gravity so I can make a sharp cut, but I got to stay in an explosive position to where I could drive out. So the quicker you drop your hips, the more energy you're creating. And the energy that you're creating by staying at that, and when you stay at that 90-degree spot, when you're creating energy, that allows you to pick your feet up, drive off your feet, actually run, which creates some speed. So we have to be explosive with the hip drop. Now, this is much easier said than done, right? I'm talking about this very matter-of-factly, like, oh, like anybody could just get to this 90-degree spot and do it violently. There are things that you have to work on to get to this point, right? In the gym, you got to do this and to create more explosion at the top of the route. Guess what that requires? That requires something in your body called, and some of you may have heard this before, so that requires something called fast twitch muscle fibers. So fast twitch, every athlete has two types of muscle fibers: slow twitch fibers and fast twitch fibers. Fast twitch fibers are what football players use. That's what you use when you sprint. That's what you use when you run routes. Slow twitch fibers are like when I'm running laps around a track, like let's say I'm running a mile. That's a slow twitch fiber because you're moving slowly, right? So football players, you want to try to increase the amount of fast twitch fibers you have in your body by moving fast and quickly in the gym when you're working out with weights or doing box jumps, plyometrics. So like, let's say you're doing like a jump squat. Let's say you put a barbell on your back, you go down halfway, and then you explode up. You're doing that for 3 to 4 reps, maybe a little bit more, but probably 3 to 4 reps, and you're trying to move as fast and as explosive as possible. So it translates to this because you need to be able to exert energy on cuts like this. Now, another thing that it requires is leg strength and ankle stability when you cut like this. So doing one-legged exercises, single leg RDLs, single leg box jumps, you kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Things that are all single leg based and balance based and honestly just lower body based all translate to this. Guys, if you have weak legs, you're not that explosive, you have weak ankles, like you're not going to be able to break like this. So you have to know the technique, which is what we discussed in the beginning of this, but you also have to do different route or different movements in the gym, I should say, outside of the field, I should say, that translate to this because it's much easier said than done. Now, what are some general things you could do as a receiver to help you get more separation? It has to do with speed, right? Notice how on these last 2 things, I have never once said that you need to be faster than the DB, right? You just need to be more efficient than the DB because the DB is not running stride for stride with us full speed. He is trying to match my speed. You control the tempo as a wide receiver. Does having speed help? Absolutely. Just look at Tyreek Hill, right? Look at DK Metcalf. Having speed helps. I'm not going to say that you don't need to be fast to play the receiver position, because one of those positions where you got to be fast. Just like DB, because you're matched up against dudes that are just freaks of nature, right? But like, let's say you're going up against a guy and you got to run a fade and you have press coverage and you take care of him with a release. You do a good release, you get separation. A lot of wide receivers, even fast wide receivers, shoot themselves in the foot because they make this cardinal mistake of looking back for the ball too early. Metcalf doesn't do that, and that's what I want to discuss. So this is the same thing on like a double move. Like, let's say it's a hitch and go. Let's say you're doing a press release. You get separation from the DB. I don't want to be like, oh crap, I got separation. Let me look for the ball and look back. Because the second you turn your head back to the quarterback, you're slowing down. So I get separated. Guys, DBs have such a disadvantage because they are starting backwards. They're starting with their hips facing us. So if we could get separation off the ball and actually run or get separation on double move, they're constantly a step behind us. I don't care how fast they are either. So to make sure that I keep that speed, to make sure that I showcase all of my speed, after that release, keep my head down. I don't want to look back for this ball until I got this guy for about 2 to 3 yards of separation, maybe 5 to 10 yards, I would say, depending on where you're at on the field. And that's when you want to look back. I want to get separation before I look back. Let's not look back for the ball until we are open. So that's just a general thing that wide receivers can do in game that'll help them showcase their speed. And maybe if they're not even the fastest, still get separation from a DB. Okay, so another thing that I want to talk about here is playing fast as a wide receiver. Because again, like we said, the DBs are always at a disadvantage because they are facing us, right? They're playing backwards. They have to backpedal. They're trying to read us. It is not a sprint. We are not in a foot race. We are not trying to just we're not just trying to run a 40-yard dash and see who's faster. They're trying to guard us. So like I said, we control the tempo of the game. But as a wide receiver, we have to play fast. So what do I mean by that? So CeeDee Lamb's running a post route here. This is a great example of him playing fast because he's got an inside shade guy. And so this comes down to your guys' training. When you train, you have to put yourselves in situations like this. And I'll explain how you can do that in a second. But we have inside shade press. We have to run a post. Ideally, what Lamb would like to do here is attack this DB's leverage, take the outside release, and then break to the post. But when we attack a DB's leverage sometimes, that DB might disguise his leverage. We attack him, and then he might jump outside. We have to be able to play fast, react fast, and then just take the inside release. Take what he gives us. So let's watch what he does here. So Lamb comes off the ball. He attacks him, but DB doesn't move. He gives up the inside. He just goes. That is a perfect example of playing fast, right? Because, guys, at the end of the day, you got to play fast as a receiver. That's part of the position. That's part of what we do. So, again, you see what he does. He's attacking him. I'm not going to pretend like I know what Lamb was thinking here because I don't. I'm not him. I wasn't on the field. But I can assume that he was probably trying to attack this dude, and if this dude kept his leverage to the inside, he would have taken that outside release and worked, because you've seen Lamb do that kind of thing before. But this DB just kind of sat flat-footed, and you see how he takes his first step to the outside, kind of shading to the outside, not really giving up the outside, but still giving up that inside release. He just takes it. He just goes and goes. That's what you want to work on as a wide receiver to help you play fast. So what I do, for example, like let's say I got 2 wide receivers let's say I got 2 wide receivers that I'm training, right? I'll have one of the wide receivers act as a DB, one of the receivers act as a receiver. I'll say we're running post routes, right? Let's say it's a post. I will stand over here. I'm the quarterback. I'm throwing. The receiver will look away. I will tell this DB what to do. I will tell him I'll either hold up the number 1 or I will hold up the number 2. Number 1 means he stays to his leverage. Number 2 means that he widens to the outside or gives up the inside release. So on the snap of the ball, we have a predetermined release as a receiver. We're going to be attacking this guy, but he has to read this DB. If this DB sits to the inside, cool, I just do the release. This DB jumps outside, cool, I can react. But you've got to train those situations so in a game, we could do this type of stuff fast. Because a lot of receivers try to do this, but they think too much, and it slows them down, and that's not doing our job as a receiver, which is playing slow. All right, fellas, really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. Always appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys. And again, fellas, if you'd like to train with us in 15 different cities across the country this year, first 2 camps are sold out, but the rest of the camps still have remaining spots open. So again, very first link in that description below. I'll see you guys next time.